Welcome back, learners. Today we are going to talk about multicultural competency. And in order for us to become multiculturally competent, helping professionals, we must be able to and willing to explore our worldview, which includes attitudes, values, beliefs, and biases. We understand that developmentally, we all have had experiences that inform our schema, our sense of self and others, and how we interact to and relate with one another, all of which might have been altered through our life experiences and will continue to evolve with continued growth, development, education, and lifelong experiences. Historically, substance use disorder treatment approaches were developed by European American middle class males. This was also based on the assumption that the majority of substance use disorder treatment would be for middle class males. Today, we're starting to understand the importance of the much needed shift to being culturally competent in working with diverse individuals. Research suggests that minority clients are more likely to discontinue treatment after just one session. Counselors are consistently tasked with being multiculturally competent enough to establish rapport very early in the therapeutic relationship. As such, it's important for us to understand our own attitudes, values, beliefs, and biases in order to do our own work in those areas, to consistently seek supervision and consultation, and to create understanding and develop the skills needed to be non-judgmental, empathetic, and curious when working with diverse individuals. So, as we start the conversation, we need to address the elephant in the room. In being culturally competent, we understand that we will have to have very transparent and open conversations, and that those conversations could be paired with empathy, curiosity, and all coming from a non-judgmental place. We know that withdrawing, disengaging, or avoiding difficult conversations can only serve to perpetuate trauma. And if we are going to do that, it's going to be awkward. That ongoing denial, ignorance, or diversion can definitely have traumatic effects on one's health and well-being, not only for the individual seeking counseling services, but also for the individual who is providing that counseling. If we find ourselves in a situation when we're feeling like we don't want to address something that has been very evident and very much in front of us, just like this elephant in the room, we're going to have to do the work on ourselves to ensure we are engaging in self-care and understand where this avoidance is coming from for us and how we begin to manage that, because ultimately we are ethically obligated to support the health and well-being of our clients. In regard to adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, we've spoke a bit about this already throughout our time together, and we do in fact understand that individuals with 4 or more ACEs have a 4 to 12-fold increase in health risk for depression, alcoholism, drug use, and suicide attempts. These folks also have a 2 to 4-fold increase in smoking and poor self-rated health. We understand that detriment to one's healthcare and detriments to one's overall health in the lifespan can greatly be impacted for those who have experiences of adverse childhood experiences. Individuals with trauma and substance use disorders often have poorer treatment outcomes and other difficult life issues such as mental health disorders, difficulty with homelessness, poverty, and they are at increased risk of HIV and other infectious diseases. We understand that this can be a result of maladaptive coping and high-risk environments. I'd also like to point out that the ACEs tool is not a tool that we should be using in our clinical work. The ACEs tool, that purpose is really for research studies, and it has brought a lot of information to our field. However, we have to recognize that without individuals who we work with being able to self-regulate, without being appropriately trained to administer the ACEs, this could be very detrimental and could cause harm and could then again perpetuate potential trauma. So as we continue the conversation, we must look at race, ethnicity, and trauma. Race and ethnicity These words are often used interchangeably, but they are very distinct and separate from one another. Ethnicity refers to ancestry or one's cultural identity, and there are genetic connections there. Race, on the other hand, is a socially constructed way to look at hierarchy, and it really perpetuates the idea of inequality. It is very arbitrary. Race might look like skin color, hair color, physical presentation, and with that, there are assumptions and biases that might exist about one's race. Racial trauma involves a traumatic response to race or ethnicity related experiences of racism that could potentially involve discrimination, prejudice, violence against racial groups based on attitudes of superiority held by the dominant group. Within our society, we have historical underpinnings of racial trauma that we cannot ignore as helping professionals. Examples of racial trauma include interpersonal, such as overt racial slurs or threats, and systemic racism trauma. Some of these examples might include police harassment, workforce discrimination, community violence, and mass incarceration. Minority or marginalized populations experience trauma differently and have increased barriers to treatment, which might include language barriers, insurance or healthcare barriers, limited access to childcare, lower SES, which might create barriers around transportation and childcare too. We do have a sense that Black and Latino Americans have a higher rate of lifetime PTSD compared to white Americans. Please recognize that the Latino population is the second largest minority group in the United States. The Latino population very much thrives on the concept of family and a collectivist approach. Therefore, substance use professionals, we must be able to increase our awareness of what family means to them, to engage family within treatment wherever possible and appropriate. And this could be very helpful in working with such marginalized populations, really understanding these values. It's important to understand that individuals of the Latino population appear to have increased substance use disorders proportionate to the degree of acculturation that they are experiencing. Additionally, individuals that are Black really have an emphasis on spirituality, church, and family. There are historical underpinnings of health and wellness that have tied the Black community to spiritual concepts, to church, to religion, and family. There is also a sense of community, of a collectivist approach. So, again, all very helpful to have background understanding when working with the diverse populations of people of color and Latino folks. People of color, we know, are consistently underrepresented in treatment studies, and we have a lack of understanding around racial trauma and subsequent influences on one's well being or mental health conditions such as PTSD. We do recognize that treatment tools that are not validated or normed on minority populations can impact misdiagnosis, underassessment, or inadequately assessing marginalized populations, leading to treatment issues, including misdiagnosis, prescription of wrong medications to treat that misdiagnosis, particular levels of care that are not effective, again, perpetuating concerns around one's health and well being, potentially doing more harm in the field, and then also perpetuating this idea of mistrust. We know historically there has been a lot of trust issues with diverse populations, especially when people of color and white Americans, due to historical situations such as the Syphilis Project, just to give you one example. When we look at the LGBTQ plus community, I want you to have a brief understanding here and continue to do the work as this language is constantly evolving and that new information is constantly on the forefront. Look at how we identify that individuals in the LGBTQ plus community. I want to show you the gingerbread person here. This is a great graphic to help look at sexual identity, sexual orientation, and sexual expression, all of which are highly diverse. Again, some of these words are misunderstood and misused or used in an interchangeable manner, and that creates ruptures in the therapeutic alliance. Let's start to look at what gender identity, expression, and sexual orientation means to a person. We recognize the individuals that identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, pansexual, that they are all a minority identity and are more likely to experience trauma and victimization compared to their heterosexual counterparts. LGBTQ plus youth have rates up to 2 times higher of emotional abuse. Additionally, approximately 91% of transgender people experience traumatic events across their lifetime. LGBTQ plus individuals are 2 times more likely to experience hate crimes compared to groups of other minority populations within the United States. In addition, these individuals are more likely to attempt suicide, report increased depression, and also have an increased use of illicit drugs. We do recognize that oppression does exist among the LGBTQ plus community, and this can often result in cultural oppression or societal disapproval. And we do see the individuals of this community are very concerned about rejection, that there's a lot of potential for family rejection and or bullying, and that's definitely going to impact their health and well-being. So as we look to develop meaning and purpose and help individuals to engage in self-exploration, again, we must become familiar with the different types of identity seen here. Rates of substance use and trauma are significantly high for our veteran population. Between 11 and 20% of Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom have, in fact, had a PTSD diagnosis in any given year. Approximately 30% of Vietnam veterans had had PTSD in their lifetime. PTSD in the military can also result from sexual trauma. Research has informed us that 55% of women have experienced sexual harassment when serving in the military, and 23% reported sexual assault. Cultural aspects of resilience. So a little bit earlier, I mentioned implications for substance use disorder counselors when working with diverse populations. So for example, when working with people of color, let's look to their sense of spirituality, to their sense of family, to their collectivist approach to health and well-being to best understand how to nurture and restore these connections. We see the strong importance of kinship bonds and look to this concept of respect for older adults within a family unit, and if that is in fact something that exists for a person. How do we foster those connections and help to reconnect or establish new connections with older adults within the family unit? Spiritual and religious practices are, of course, an important area that has often been an area that there's a gap for those who are early in recovery. And for those individuals who have experienced trauma, there could be a lot of questioning going on here. So I like to say to help people, what's going to provide you with good, orderly direction? Sometimes people get hung up on their sense of God or potential resentment for why did this happen to me or how has this come to be? And they're really struggling with this idea of spirituality and faith and religion. So what we really want to do is just hope that they have some good orderly direction that can help provide a sense of health and well-being in the recovery process that's going to be maybe more palatable for individuals. The expression of humor or creativity is going to be very useful for us as we move through treatment. Many of us come into the field with what we like to call the it factor. For some of you, it may be humor. For some others of you, it may be creativity. So how do we help tap into other people's interests and hobbies, or in a way that's creative? How do we help to engage in humor when it's appropriate to do so? How do we help to be a human in a room, connecting with another human and working collaboratively to make a very powerful, meaningful relationship? Let's be curious and gain a sense of understanding of one's heritage, history, and historical traditions. As we know, substance use disorders and trauma can be very disengaging for the individual. They may step away from things that they enjoyed, from hobbies they used to engage in, and they no longer feel that they are a part of something. So maybe we can foster some new traditions. And how do we reconnect with historical traditions when, if at all possible? In looking at community orientation, activities, or socialization, Always keep a community resource binder on hand and continue to look for diverse community events. We see the LGBTQ plus community, that there are support groups for parents, for friends, for family members of lesbian and gay individuals. So we want to make sure that we filter through these and see what's available for people and make sure that we're sharing this information, because other ways they may not know where to go for support or have access to services such as this. Clinical practices that are best for trauma-informed care. We look at 6 principles of trauma-informed care, which include developing a safe holding space and fostering safety to support health and well-being of individuals in care. Being trustworthy and transparent, again, looking at that elephant in the room. How do we become trustworthy yet transparent? And recognizing some of the challenges, being curious when we don't have all of the answers. In doing our own legwork to explore the literature to help gain an understanding, to help immerse ourselves into diverse cultures and in our communities, to help be more like-minded and to have experiences that are going to help increase our ability to become culturally competent. Look at peer support. Again, community resources, what is available, what is out there? How do we help people engage with supports that have similar lived experiences? Collaboration and mutuality. So we're going to be collaborative and we're going to be an advocate. We're going to be involved in social justice, and we're going to be a guide walking alongside someone. We recognize that diversity actually enhances our life, our livelihood, our well-being. So a significant advocate in the field for collaboration and mutuality is going to be beneficial for everyone involved. We're going to help empower people to have a voice and a choice. Genetically, we're moving further away from this concept that you cannot control your condition. The idea once was that if you have a disease, you always have a disease. And it helps with this sense of choicelessness to manifest within one's life. We really want to challenge those types of concepts, and we want to look at one's environment and to look at one's learned behavior and development. We want to engage in behaviors and self-regulatory behaviors so the individual can feel empowered and have an internal locus of control. Here we're also going to look to deconstruct or externalize things that have occurred in one's life where they may be saying, I deserved this, or I am damaged as a result of this. And we can do this simply by asking what has happened to you versus what is wrong with you. Additionally, looking at our cultural and historical and gender issues within our society, we know that race is a societally constructed idea. We see lots of isms, racism, sexism, and so forth. So become familiar with what an individual has experienced, and also, again, do the research to help to gain connections into the community. Do your own work around your worldview, your attitudes, your beliefs, and your biases. When you are going to do your own work, you're going to have to start with this sense of a continuum of cultural competency, as we can see here on this slide. The first, we have to have conversations around privilege oppression. It's very common that people get angry, that people get sad, people get upset, and there are a number of reasons for this. When we look at this continuum, is the idea of staying open-minded a concept where these feelings are coming from for you? What has been part of your experience that has caused you to feel a certain way? And then what do you do with that and those feelings? How can we help to support your evolution of recognizing, identifying, and best managing your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in order to help someone who is diverse from you or who's different from you? We see this continuum, and all the way on the end is cultural destructiveness. And as we move to the other end, we see cultural proficiency. When you look through here, you also see the concept of cultural blindness, in which differences are simply ignored. It's that elephant in the room, and we're just going to ignore it in this stage. Again, this is going to perpetuate trauma, and there's a sense of denial. So let's look at this concept If you treat everyone the same, I would really challenge you to take a deeper look at your attitudes, beliefs, and biases. Certain things are going to be innate for you. You will have to do a deep exploration of looking at what it is that means for you. As you explore cultural issues, you become more committed to assessing the needs for individuals who are diverse in a more diverse manner. You recognize these differences, you seek advice, you immerse yourself in different experiences, and you really start to address your own biases. Ultimately, the goal is to implement change that improves cultural competency and addresses people in an appropriate manner. Finally, I'll close by looking at the cultural competence as a process rather than a goal. People who have experienced trauma are not condemned to a life of hopelessness and helplessness. As helping professionals becoming culturally competent, we can help empower them to have a voice, to deconstruct, to externalize, and to gain an internal locus of control with the ability to self-regulate and know that recovery is possible. In doing so, we need to treat one another with respect, and I do very much adhere to these sanctuary commitments of nonviolence, social learning, growth and change, shared governance, social responsibility, open communication, and emotional intelligence. Thank you for taking the time to give some thought to becoming a culturally competent counselor. I hope that you take the time to do some additional research on your own attitudes, beliefs, and biases with regard to working with diverse populations that you may be exposed to. As we explore where you fall on the continuum of cultural competency and start to look at a plan of action to support your professional identity and development in becoming a culturally competent helping professional.